Today, I'm going to take a departure from talking to y'all about insect pest management and talk about how honeybees forage in a mixed crop landscape, and that includes peanut in our area. And this project is a collaboration between myself, Margaret Cuvion, and Roger Church, and we're all at the Virginia Tech Department of Entomology. And this picture is courtesy of David Jordan at NCSU. And this is not a honeybee. But it does demonstrate that if you look at peanut flowers long enough, you will find a pollinator. And this is a big deal to a lot of people right now because there's this reduction in the number of honeybee colonies. And overwhelmingly, the scientific consensus is that it's this combination of things, right? So it's poor nutrition, it's pests, it's pathogens, it's pesticides. It's no single thing. It's like death by 1,000 cuts. But when you read the articles that come out, I feel like overwhelmingly we're the target of the criticism of where bees are dying, insects in general are declining, are these anthropomorphic changes in the landscape. So what are human beings doing to the landscape to make it less friendly for bees? Ooh, let me start my timer. And when I think about anthropomorphic changes to landscape, I see this. Right, I see like all these lawns and no flowers, and this is really urban heat and sprawl, or suburban heat and sprawl going on. But a lot of people see this, right? They see row crops and they see agriculture, and we use a lot of pesticides, and we have to, right, justifiably. But you know, most people don't farm, so most people don't think about the cost benefit ratio of some of these things. And rightly so, we look at agriculture as a player in bee health because it's the dominant use of arable land in the US, in Virginia where I live, and worldwide. And when I talk about this, of course, we could probably say that corn acreage is the dominant use of arable land worldwide. But cotton, peanuts, and soybeans are important contributors. And although these plants are self or wind pollinated, they do produce nectar and pollen and can be attractive to bees. This photo is a picture of a peanut flower, courtesy of Bob Peterson. I'm sorry, I stole it from the NCSU website. And there are about 24,000 acres of peanut in Virginia annually. And this is some peanut pollen. If you've never seen it, this took a lot of flowers and some of my more enthusiastic employees to get. That's the color of it. And in addition to what these bees may be getting floral resources from our crops, they could also be getting floral resources by weeds, either in the field or nearby the field. So this is purslane or portulaca. This is outside of my bee sheds. This is probably one of my bees. And then importantly, and more of a recent thing are cover crops, right? So we have crimson clover here in this example, and this is a blooming cover crop. So there could be using our crop fields either for the crops or for something that's not the crop in question. And I apologize, my neighbor just decided to start working on his yard randomly as I talk. So the objectives of our study were to find out how bees forage in row crops. So we can look at how far a bee travels as a proxy for food availability, because they won't travel farther than they need to find food. We also wanted to calculate the percentage of foraging in row crops by crop type. And then we wanted to determine further what species of pollen they're actually bringing back. So are they bringing back the pollen of the row crops, and what kind of pesticides are they finding as common? And what our project really unique is how we look at foraging. And if you don't learn anything else from this entomology topic, learn that honeybees tell their work. And they do this for something called the waggle. So this bee here in the center of the slide is waggling her butt, she's turning, she's waggling her butt again. And it's this angle that she's making in her waggle that's letting her sisters know when they go out the door of the hive or the opening of the hive, what angle should they go with relative to where the is on them. And the distance of her dance is letting them know how far in that direction. This is really cool. This is something discovered by Carl von Fritsch in 1946. So tell your family tonight that bees talk to each other in the hive and tell each other. Pretty cool, huh? But these waggle dances are filtered information, so they only show where bees are collecting the best resources that are known to them at any given time. So they could find a lot of stuff in their day, but they're only going to come back and tell their sisters, their nestmates, where the best quality forage is. And this resource or best quality forage can include pollen, which is a protein source that they only use when they're rearing their babies. It could be nectar, which is, they're very nectar driven so far as nutritional food source. It's sugar, it's what they make most of their diet up of. It could be water in time of drought. It could be a new home if they're ready to swarm, or it could be tree resin if there's some structural thing in the hive that they need to correct. But what's the important takeaway for this project is distance really reflects forage availability. So think about this, right? Like if Royal Farms, which is the mile from my house, has my favorite beer, I'm gonna go to Royal Farms instead of driving the extra 5 miles to Food Lion, and bees are the same way. So flight is economically, like gasoline for our vehicles, very costly. It takes them energy to fly. So they're not gonna fly farther than they have to find what they need. Our study took place at the Tidewater Research Center in obviously southeastern Virginia, the Tidewater region of Virginia. And we have a mixed crop usage of cotton, corn, peanuts, soybeans, small grains, some sorghum. And it's between 5.5% and 6% peanuts within a 2-kilometer radius of the hive. And I'll explain why that's important. We had 3 separate hives, so each of these tubes represents an entrance to a different hive. The hives were in a stacked observation format, so we could film them 3 times a week for an hour a day. And then our lovely graduate students and undergraduate students really worked their tails off watching each of these dances and translating them in terms of what direction they're going and how far they're flying. My staff then drove these distances and made a map of each foraging year of the project. Initially, we used the USDA crop raster layer. And when I went into that recently and animated where these bees were going, I started to have some questions about its accuracy. So when we used the USDA, it really indicated that cotton was important. But this month, when I used this lovely map for my technicians, I learned that peanut was really important. So I'm glad I did that before the meeting today. It wasn't a huge correction in terms of the overall message of the paper, but it is highlighting the importance of peanut, and we'll get to that in a second. And then we use these mesh coverings for the entrances of the hive. And what these do is they knock off the balls of pollen on their legs when they come through. So simultaneous with filming, we are collecting their pollen. This graph shows distance traveled by month, April through October. So we only film those months where bees are active. And distance is here on the vertical. We have dates on the left in 2018, dates on the right in 2019 as color-coded by month. Don't try to unpack this whole box and whisker graph in a few seconds. What I want to emphasize with it is that these purple boxes, and if we look at the median distance in both of these purple boxes in the 2 years of our study, we see that bees are flying the shortest amount in July. Whoa, so what, Sally? I don't know when bees fly. When we look at other research and we look at other systems and other labs that have done similar things, midsummer is this time. If you're a gardener, you know things flower in the spring and they flower in the fall. Midsummer is the time where bees starve. So in contrast, we have these bees living in agricultural fields that aren't going very far for food during high summer. And that's a really important thing. And when we ask, when are these crops in bloom? So I spoke with all of our agronomists at NC State and Virginia Tech to estimate when plants are in greater than 75% bloom. So if I go in a field, 3/4 of them are going to have a bloom. And if you look at this month, July, corn, peanut, cotton, soybean, everything that they're near is in heavy bloom. What's interesting about peanut and cotton and why we think they may be more important to these hives is this tailing off, right? So they don't have this determinate bloom period. They're not going to, as long as conditions are favorable for them to bloom, they're going to keep blooming. So here's some maps my people made with Google Earth, and this top left is 2018, bottom left is 2019. Again, it's color-coded cotton blue, corn orange, peanut, what we're talking about today, yellow, soybean green, and other. It's water, it's trees, it's yards. And then what these graphs to the right of those are showing is where that foraging is concentrated. So where you see that blocking out of the screen, or that color really pop through, it means they're going to that location. And this first set is divided by year, 2018 on top, 2019 on bottom. This first set is before crops bloom. And you see this really diffuse, smoky pattern because they're going a lot of places. But then when we look at these two center circles, these are when crops bloom. And you see how that foraging go like suck in really tight, and these crops pop, and you realize that they're not even leaving the research station to get what they need. And this is especially true during this period in 2019, where we had a pretty severe drought during this exact time period. And then when we get to this post bloom, all that foraging that was really tight starts spreading back out, and we see them hitting the swamps and some of our wetter areas for the things they like. So we found this to be like super interesting. This is a really tight foraging radius they use. And I'm sorry, I had to present this in a table because I literally just got these results. But this is by crop, by year. It's got percent land cover. So how much of the land are they going to? And we should expect if peanut in 2018 covers 5% of our land, then they should be going to peanut 5% of the time, right? They're going on distance. And we do see that reflected in our pre-bloom period. But what we're really interested in is the center column is the during bloom period. And though it doesn't increase a whole lot in 2018, and there's overlap in our confidence intervals, when we get to 2019 and that drought, we see this big jump. So peanuts 6%, they're foraging in peanuts 3 times more than expected based on distance, and that's a pretty big deal. And when, like, for example, just for 2019, we add up how much they're in peanut, soybean, corn, and cotton, we're over 50%, we're close to 60. And that's more than they forage in apples, folks, and people buy them to forage an apple, right? So what are they bringing back based on the pollen data? This is separated by month. I use common names because we're not all familiar with weed types and tree types. And I color coded this by green is a weed non-crop, trees are brown or it's a woody shrub, ornamentals are orange, and crops are yellow. So in our spring months, April, May, June, they're totally in the weeds so far as pollen, and some cultivated things like crepe myrtle and hydrangea. When we get into the summer months is when cotton and soybeans show up in the pollen. We also had some corn in 2019, but we also still see a lot of purslane, dandelion, clover, ragweed, things that are by our crop fields we may not want in our crop fields. And then when we get to fall, they're entirely back in the weeds. And bear in mind, this is pollen, this is not nectar. And what they're getting in this pollen, and bear in mind too that they're on a research station, so I might use 5 types of insecticides to kill a caterpillar, where a normal producer in peanuts would use like 1 or 2, right? But they're bringing back pesticides that are in peanut, and they're bringing back herbicides, they're bringing back fungicides, and to me the fungicides was what's really telling us that they were in peanut, is like they weren't getting all these fungicides in soybean. So that was one of the indicators that made me reanalyze the data. And what I did for these slides, color-coded yellow is herbicide, orange is insecticide, and green is fungicide. And I just underlined those that could have come from a peanut field because that's where we're using these insecticides. So most of these, I didn't put the rate or the parts per billion on this because it would have made it really busy. None of this stuff, y'all, was over the LD50s to what should kill a bee. And overwhelmingly, the most toxic chemicals they use, they didn't bring back. And that's probably because they didn't make it back, if I had to hypothesize. But it's a really important takeaway that we're not we shouldn't just be looking at insecticides. We shouldn't be looking at one thing. We need to be looking at a whole bunch of things in combination when we talk about honeybee and pollinator toxicity. Again, this is fall, just to show that, my God, atrazine all year long. What's going on? So what's the takeaway today? Well, peanuts provide valuable nutrition to pollinators during critical time. And this isn't in terms of pollen, what they're getting out of these flowers is largely nectar. So we can separate these dances by pollen and nectar, and that's what we'll be doing for the next paper. And they're returning a lot of pesticides to hives in very low levels, and this may be a trade-off for them getting that valuable nutrition during high summer. These are all the wonderful people that contributed to the project, including our graduate student, Mary Solomon, Roger Church here in the middle, and Maggie on the right, our funding sources on the bottom. I want to thank Gary, David, especially Kim, who reminded me to make a presentation and come today, and who has like 0 online photos I could find. Kudos to you, Kim. If you want to learn more about bees dancing and what that means and how we interpret it, my friend Maggie has a TED Talk. This will be shared online. This is being recorded, so you can find it here, but you could also Google bees dancing TED Talk and get there too. This is me, my email and my mobile number and my blog. I think that's it. And if there's time, I'll have questions, but I think we're up at my 15 minutes.
Thanks a lot, Sally. I think we're out of time. So if you'll hang around in the panelist area, which I think you are, if folks have questions, they can send some questions there and you can reply there. But thanks for being here today, and thanks for presenting that good information.
Thank you.